Theros was a top-down design plane, meaning flavor was king, and the development and creative teams modeled this world after Greek mythology. The Theros set was released in September 2013 and part of a 3-part block, all taking place on the plane. We are revisiting this land full of gods and living enchantments in January 2020. So let's start with a basic recap on the makeup of the plane. Theros is made up of 3 realms, with the first being the normal world of the living where us humans are at. There are 3 major cities known as Polis or Polis in the singular, which is literally the Greek word for city, so well done, wizards. The 3 cities are Miletus, the city of learning, magic, and progress, which sits on a coast surrounded by rivers and grassland. Akros, a city of diehard warriors surrounded by mountains that restrict contact with the rest of the plane. And Satessa, a city close to nature that puts a lot of emphasis on families. Now, in Greek mythology, the gods lived on Mount Olympus. On Theros, Nyx is the heavens, or the land of night and home of the gods. Now, not only do the gods reside in Nyx, but the locals also believe dreams are messages from the gods, and when the likenesses of one appear in the night sky, that is the god coming from the spiritual world to the mortal world and residing in both at the same time, like you can do when you're all-powerful and a god. And the third realm is below Theros, and that is the underworld. It is separated from Theros by 5 rivers and is where the dead end up and dwell. Now let's get into the gods of this plane that make this world so unique. In Greek mythology, their gods or Olympians reside on Mount Olympus, and their existence is often tied to some life lesson or interesting tale about Disney classics or explain vulnerabilities in our anatomy like Achilles. For Theros, gods are unsurprisingly linked to a color in magic. There are 5 main gods, 1 for each color, with every one of those having a legendary weapon to accompany them into battle. And the pantheon of Theros gods is rounded out by the 10 lesser dual color gods, of course 1 for each dual color combination. Theros inhabitants see enchantments as gifts from the gods, and we see in the set they are in fact living enchantments. Okay, so that's the plane. Now what about the lore? Well, here's a massive simplification of what's happened since our last visit, and yes, spoilers ahead. The block's main protagonist is Elspeth Tyrell, who we've already seen on advertisements for the new upcoming set. Elspeth is a planeswalker who landed on Theros after planeswalking away from New Phyrexia. She earned the title Sun's Champion from Heliod the Sun God when she used Godsend to defeat Polukranos World Eater, a pesky Hydra beast terrorizing the countryside on Theros. I think of Heliod like Zeus, big guns, Mr. Head Honcho, and he really wants Elspeth to be his champion. Theros' main antagonist was Xenagos the Reveler. A huge fan of nihilism and viewing life as pointless, his goal was to deify himself and become a god as well. Let's go with a Nicol Bolas wannabe. He tricks folks into making that happen, but then Heliod gets ticked off and now wants to take it out on Elspeth because reasons, obviously. Unsurprisingly, Elspeth isn't a fan of that idea and finds Ajani just wandering about in the woods. They bond over both having white in their planeswalker cards and team up to find a way into Nyx. They find Krufix, god of horizons, thanks to Kiora, who is often confused with, but definitely not, Thassa, god of the sea. Krufix grants them passage into Nyx, but Elspeth has to undergo an ordeal and choose a god to test her first. She chooses Erebos, god of the dead, who tempts her with peace. She declines, and she and Ajani push onward into Nyx, in fact for the exact opposite of peace. Elspeth finds Xenagos, strikes him down with Godsend, and it's good game from there on out. Except Heliod still has a grudge and does not forgive Elspeth for the Xenagos problem. Before Elspeth and Ajani can escape, Heliod strikes Elspeth down with Godsend. What a jerk. Heliod orders Ajani to take Elspeth back to the mortal realm so she can die. He does, trying to think of a way to help her once he gets back, but is ambushed and heads back into the wilderness. Meanwhile, Erebos is super excited and takes Elspeth into the underworld, and that's really where the story of our protagonist ends. But also why Beyond Death is so exciting. What has become of Elspeth in the underworld? How will she recover from what Heliod has done to her? And how will she escape? Will she escape? Will she stay white forever? I should also note that Ashiok does make an appearance throughout the storyline as well when we were last on Theros. They were messing with folks in their dreams and replacing them as they saw fit, then partners up with Fennex, god of deception, and they go off the deep end raising a new god, Cacophony, god of cities. Afara, god of the Polis, is not happy based on the obvious infringement on her name, strikes it down, and swears to find the mortal who created such an abomination. Ashiok could not be less intimidated and considers the experiment a total success. And there is the lore in a nutshell. Now to recap gameplay from when we were last on Theros, there was a lot of new mechanics. Who knows what will return, but here's what we can keep an eye out for. Enchantment creatures and enchantment artifacts, which you can argue are somewhat redundant. Constellation is something you trigger when enchantments enter the battlefield. Heroic is a mechanic you'll only find on creatures, and it's when they get really excited that you targeted them with spells. Strive is only on sorceries and instants and allows you to pay more to have more targets. Bestow is something you'll find on enchantment creatures where they act as enchantments. Devotion is where gods want to see you care by bringing them other permanents with the same color or colors. Monstrous is basically adapt, but with a different name. Tribute is monstrous, but only occurs when the creature enters the battlefield. And lastly, Inspired, where you get some value when the creature untaps. So that's the gist of our last trip to Theros. I hope this helped you better understand what happened, what questions are still to answer, and be more aware of what is new or returning as we learn more about this new set. I think we're going to see one of the most dramatic changes to a planeswalker and a very unique battle between creatures of the same color. Time will tell, of course, but what we do know from earlier spoilers is that Elspeth has a white planeswalker card, which I think is clearly referencing her time on Phyrexia, or at least a pull towards black with her weapon she is holding. I think this is very exciting, but what do you think? What will become of Elspeth? What predictions do you have for the set? I'm very excited to see how this storyline continues. Let me know your predictions about what you're expecting for Theros Beyond Death, and I'll see you in the comments. Thank you to Card Kingdom for sponsoring the channel. It's where you can pick up your favorite god cards if you need to finish up your collection from our last visit to Theros. And thank you to my patrons for being the best patrons a content creator could ask for. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.